Now I'll start the presentation. Hello, we are Seo Yeon-ho and Myung-bin Kim. We are going to make a presentation about do we act if we know? The presentation revolves around Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, Volume 7. This is the content of today's presentation. In introduction, we will explain about internalism and externalism. In the second part, we will learn the knowledge described in Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. In the last part, we will discuss the positive of akrasia and present knowledge as a way for knowledge to lead to action. Can you do something when we know it is good? The Bible tells the following story. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again, and then in his joy went and sold all he had and bought that field. This story says that anyone who knows something is good has no choice but to act inevitably. However, there are opposed stories in the Bible. For I know that good itself does not dwell in me, that is, in my sinful nature, for I have the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out. For I do not do the good I want to do, but the evil I do not want to do. This I keep on doing. This story says that someone knows something is good, but cannot act it out. How can we interpret the contradiction between these two stories? Do we act if we know? This is also an important issue in ethics today. It also indicates the position of internalism and externalism. Internalism says if we know something, it means we have a motivation for leading actions in our knowledge. Knowing that something is good or bad implies a commanding characteristic that it should be done or not. Since value judgment contain a motivational element, we are driven to act by that motivational factor. Richard Hare, the modern ethicist, represents this stance. On the other hand, externalism says that knowledge is just a judgment. The motivation of an act is an external element, not hidden in knowledge. Donald Davis represents this stance. In ancient philosophy, the representative of internalism is Socrates. Socrates thinks that anyone who knows correctly can't act incontinently. According to him, no one who acts against what is best does so on the supposition that he is doing so, whether it occurs through ignorance. Aristotle says about this argument, this view is plainly at variance with the way things appear to people. Aristotle acknowledged there can be the state of not doing what we thought was right or doing what we thought was wrong, which is called akaraxia. It can be translated into English as weakness of will or incontinence. In this presentation, I will call it incontinence, following Roger Crisp. The most important thing to answer our question of do we act if we know would be how explain the akraxia we experience in our daily lives. How is akraxia possible? Can we really not act when we know something? Or is akraxia really possible? Now, let's follow Aristotle's discussion of akraxia. First, we should see which context Aristotle's akraxia comes in. Aristotle divides the status of human character into four types. On the slide, superhuman virtue and prettiness represent literally the state of God and the state of beast. Human character goes for the other four. Although there is domain which is for normal human beings between enkrateia and akraxia, Aristotle doesn't explain it and mainly discuss these four types. First, arete is the best character status that human can pursue. People in enkrateia are more self-controlled than average persons. People in akaraxia are less self-controlled than average persons. Kakia is in an intemperate state opposite arete. Arete and enkrateia are the subject of praise, while akaraxia and kakia are the subject of criticism. The point is the virtue discussed here involves the virtue of temperate specifically. That is, here arete means virtue of temperate and kakia means the vice of intemperance. Socrates said that if you know something, you have no choice but to do it. If you don't, it's ignorance, in which akaraxia is not possible. Aristotle tries to explain what knowledge is and what ignorance is. In other words, he distinguished the kinds of knowledge to solve the problem of how akaraxia is possible. First, Aristotle divides knowledge into two categories, according to Plato's theaetetos, which is simply one knowledge or use it. For example, if we know the Pythagorean theorem, it owns knowledge. If you use it to prove it, you use knowledge. The fact we own any knowledge does not always mean that we use it. When we say we know something, the state of knowledge is divided into these two. Now, this distinction of knowledge applies to practical problems. If we know something and don't do it, it can be understood as having knowledge but not using it. In that case, akaraxia doesn't seem impossible at all. On the other hand, if you own and use knowledge, it means that you are already acting as you know it. But it seems very strange that they do not act while using knowledge. This is exactly what Socrates means by knowledge. Aristotle explained how akaraxia is possible by strictly dividing the meaning of knowledge into two types, ownership and use of knowledge, and also explained that Socrates' argument was valid. So, if knowledge simply means owning of knowledge, akaraxia is possible. If knowledge means use of knowledge, Socrates' argument is valid. Another criterion Aristotle used to distinguish knowledge is whether knowledge is internalized enough or not. According to him, saying what a person knows is not a sign of true knowledge. For example, we can smoke, saying, you shouldn't smoke. At this time, we can be said to know smoking is not allowed, but that's not really what he knows. His words are unreliable. They are just talking as the actors on the stage say. Truly knowing is to become a part of the tissue of mind, or one must grow into knowing. Namely, knowledge should be a part of oneself. In Aristotle's terms, knowledge must be my hesis. Here we can see that Aristotle also says a Socratic explanation. The standard of true knowledge is behavior, not word. The world without act doesn't seem different externally from those with act, but they are not words that reveal their inner state. True knowledge is a word consistent with one's inner state. That it can be said that akaraxia comes from knowing, but not really knowing. Aristotle also mentions the special state of knowledge. First of all, in the case of having knowledge without using it, we see a different kind of having, so that one can, in a sense, both have and not. For example, sleeping, crazy, and drunk. Likewise, there is a state of emotional obsession, such as anger or sexual desire. These even affect the body and cause madness. For example, addiction. Aristotle tells that apraxia is similar to these. It is a reasonable argument to think that apraxia is caused by passion, especially pleasure. We can understand that just to the extent that our knowledge is not normal. Next, Aristotle says that a variety of knowledge involved in one act. He explains behavior in the form of practical reasoning. A major premise is knowledge of universal, and a minor premise is knowledge of particular. For example, let's explain the act of someone not actually eating sweet. If there is a universal judgment that you should not eat sweet things, and there is a particular judgment that this is a sweet thing, then the conclusion is drawn here, you should not eat this. But if he ate this, it could be seen as a problem with the use of the minor premise. Because all actors are done in particular circumstances, he is well aware of the fact that shouldn't eat sweet things. But he did not think this was sweet. Because he applied different standard for sweet, he might have judged that it wasn't very sweet. As such, there are cases of knowing and not practicing. On the other hand, there are a collision of two different major premises. There is a major premise that you should not eat sweet things. On the other hand, there is a major premise that all sweet things give pleasure. In this case, the major premise meets the particular situation of this is sweet, and the conclusion that you should not eat this and you should eat this is drawn. The two conclusions conflict with each other, and Socrates chose the latter conclusion. However, this seems to be a conflict between the two practice inference, but in reality, it is reason and appetite that conflict at this time, because it is desire to move practice inference too. The two inferences are merely a demonstration of the process in which we act according to reason and desire in the form of inference. In this case, practice inference 1 to act on knowledge was interrupted by practice inference 2. Over the specific situation, this is sweet. It can be said that appetite to sweet things give pleasure was involved in situation of this is sweet. It can be said that rational practice has been interrupted by appetite. Now, we can explain the condition under which apraxia is established as follows. First, universal ought judgment. Second, appetite in specific circumstances. Universal ought judgment is knowledge of the universal, that you should not eat sweet things. And appetite in specific circumstances is appetite that works in the particular situation of this is sweet. If a person without self-control is carried away by passion or appetite, knowledge of individual things may not work, or even if it works, it can read the wrong conclusion as appetite. However, this situation does not apply only to apraxia. The same situation applies to enkrateia. Although enkrattheia suffers from the same conflict, it follows the conclusion of reasoning read by reason. However, akraxia follows the conclusion of reasoning read by appetite. Now, there seems to be some answers to our question. Do we act if we know? Our tentative answer from the discussion of Aristotle is yes. A case of knowing but not acting is a case of not knowing properly, and a case of being disturbed by appetite. If we know something right and are not disturbed by appetite, our knowledge and actions will be entirely consistent. We all have a desire to act the way we know something. No one would want to suffer from the conflict between reason and appetite or the shame of breaking his will. So, is akraxia negative? Is there no hope in akraxia? For now, we will discuss the positivity of akraxia. And just like our answer to do we act if we know, we will also present knowledge as a way to lead to action in everyday life. Arete and enkrattheia are subject of praise, and akraxia and kakia are subject of criticism. On the everyday life, arete and enkrattheia are not distinguished. Akraxia and kakia are not well distinguished too. But inside of the actor, enkrattheia and akraxia have similar conflict structures. On the other hand, arete and kakia are stable without conflict. So, isn't kakia better than akraxia? But the more planned the bad thing is, the more unrighteous it is. For Aristotle, happiness is not just emotional satisfaction or subjective pleasure. Happiness is the activity of the soul in accordance with excellence. Therefore, akraxia is better because akraxia regrets and intends to match excellence. On the other hand, the following questions are raised. Someone in kakia doesn't know something, so it can be better if you know it. But someone akraxia knows something, so maybe there's no solution. But Aristotle says that kakia can't be fixed and akraxia can be fixed because kakia is continuous bad and akraxia is discontinuous bad. Socrates knows that his actions are bad and that very knowledge will lead his actions to good. Now, let's rethink their knowledge. Socrates' knowledge is episteme. Socrates used the term episteme for true knowledge regardless of theoretical and practical areas. But Aristotle strictly separates the theoretical area from practical areas. In Aristotle, episteme is a term referring to scientific knowledge, which is used only in theoretical areas. The term of knowledge in the practical is phronesis. So now, in order to overcome akraxia, which through the Aristotle discussion, we've explored. In other words, to do as we know something, you'd better change the term for knowledge from the episteme to phronesis. But phronesis is knowledge that already implies the power of practice. Aristotle said, a person is practically wise not only by knowing, but also by being disposed to act. According to Aristotle, we cannot have a virtue without phronesis, nor can we have a phronesis without virtue. So to speak, someone who has a phronesis is already a man who can practice, and a man of having virtue. From this point of view, in the end, akraxia is also ignorance. True knowledge is a phronesis, and Aristotle is also in the position of internalist, given that having a phronesis has no choice but to act. So, how can we have true knowledge? Now we will clarify our argument. We say that we can act if we know, and that knowledge at this time is true knowledge, but it's not enough to say that. In order to turn knowledge into action, we must have a clear explanation of true knowledge. It is likewise not enough to say that true knowledge is a pronesis. We may have to start a new round of extensive discussions about pronesis, but we will draw conclusions within the scope that we have discussed. Aristotle divided knowledge into two kinds: the knowledge that is owned and the knowledge that is used. The knowledge that can only be said and the knowledge of practice as one with the soul. The knowledge that there is only universal premise and individual premise does not work, and the knowledge that both premises work well. The use of knowledge, after all, means that knowledge of universal ought is well used in particular situation, and that it is not interfered with desire in particular situation. The knowledge as one with the soul is not only knowledge of universal ought, but also insight into my desire. For it has been made one by one so that it cannot interfere with my act. Knowledge of ourselves is as important as insight into the world. Knowledge of our one desire is as important as knowledge of universal ought. It is not easy to know about our own desire. Sometimes it may be distorted or hidden in unconsciousness. Perhaps what philosophical counselors should do is to help clients clarify their knowledge of themselves rather than analyze their worldviews. We say that true knowledge in practice should consist of knowledge of one's own desire and of knowledge of the ought proposition. In this respect, we claim, we act if we know. If we really know something, we will be able to act at the right time about the right things in the right way. I will finish the presentation now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Meon Bin. We have a time for short questions for our first speaker. Please, you can use your microphone and first raise your hand. If you can write down in chat.
Thank you for your presentation. I have one question. It seems that we act if we know is the main point of this presentation, but in our real lives, there are people who don't just do it. So how should we judge in this case like this?
Thank you. I think there are no standard for right and wrong behavior in Aristotle. You must always decide what to do in every particular situation. This is what pronesis means. Pronesis is also the ability to judge and act well in concrete situations, to act at the right time, about the right things, toward the right people, for the right end, on in the right way. What is right in particular situation, knowing this is pronesis. We will act if we know, when we really know, when the knowledge is pronesis. So my answer is perhaps it will be our goal to get pronesis in our real lives. We try to show one way to get it in this presentation.
It's what about the content of knowledge? It's knowledge about the virtue, or that it's knowledge about oneself?
According to the presentation, I think it is important to know about my desire. So I wondered if that would be enough. You explained on slide 15, a case of knowing but not behaving is a case of not knowing properly, and a case of being interrupted by desire. I think there needs to be something more to avoid being interrupted by desire. What do you think?
Oh, I'm sorry, my computer is suddenly turned off. Could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Yes, yeah, I can. Do you hear? Do you hear? According to the presentation, I think it is important to know about my desire. So I wonder if that would be enough. You explained on slide 15, a case of knowing but not behaving is a case of not knowing properly, and a case of being interrupted by desire. I think there needs to be something more to avoid being interrupted by desire. What do you think?
In this presentation, I say knowledge of myself as a way not to be disturbed by desire. So I want to see my last presentation. True knowledge in practice should consist of knowledge of one's own desire and of knowledge of the ought proposition. In this respect, we claim, we act, we know. This is my answer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The last question, if you want, and we continue. So, okay. We continue our...
Евгений Валентинович, а ваш вопрос? Вы тоже задавали про содержание и про знание.
Oh, sorry. This in Russian said me that I also answer the question. It's my question was, what is the content of the knowledge? Its content is about the knowledge about the virtue, as example, or a knowledge about oneself, about the human being. What is the content of knowledge?
Oh, I'm sorry. I think I need some time to think about it.
Okay. It's not a knowledge in general, but in context of the Aristotle's ethic. I'm sorry, this is a question about the comprehend something. And sorry, it's, okay. We continue our round table. Let's next speaker. Yes, Yankee Kim, and your presentation, please. I give you the microphone, please, Yankee.
Thank you. Очень приятно. Меня зовут Kim Young-ki. Let's start my presentation. My name is Kim Young-ki Kim. My presentation is about Nietzsche's body philosophy and hip-hop as a way of life. First of all, I'm going to tell you that I can't present everything because of the time limit. So I'm going to focus on the important parts. This is index. Next. This presentation aimed to examine Nietzsche's view on ancient Greek tragedy among Nietzsche's art philosophy, focusing on his book, The Birth of the Tragedy, and reinterpreting them into modern hip-hop to explore the possibility of incorporating them into philosophy counseling. Next. Nihilism creates the sense of meaning in life in humans, and the ephemeral of all creation and extinction. In other words, the world is a kind of sea of the pain itself, where only absurdity and injustice overflow. Nietzsche once talked about the danger of nihilism. Human beings who want to be willing to vain desire something that will cover up the fertility of life. But until modern times, God, who had given meaning to human life, died, and humans were again faced with the futility of life. To get out of this, humans put material and money in the place where God disappeared, and blind faith in money changed the purpose of human life to simply become richer than others and make more money. We just fell back into the wrong decadence that simply earning a lot of money will bring happiness in life. In order to overcome this wrong decadence and nihilism, Nietzsche once presented art as a solution. Among them, the ancient Greek tragedy is the core of Nietzsche's art. Then, let's look at why art is a solution of nihilism and what tragedy means. In tragedy, Nietzsche presented three types of the artists: Apollonian artist, Dionysian artist, Apollon and Dionysos artist combined. Apollonian artist means the dreaming of some perfection as a way to overcome it in a painful and incomplete world, which is represented by intelligence and reason. This world is only possible in dream and not in the real world. In other words, in the process of converting the contradiction of the real world in virtual reality, Apollon's stick artists are born. It appears in the form of literary and sculptural art. The Dionysos artist is too from and immersed in the painful world and life. Unlike an Apollon artist, they show no limit or fatal limits and are represented by wildness, impulse, madness, and intoxication. The Dionysos artist expressed the desire that rises without any form or boundary, just like a drunk Dionysos. And the expression of this desire resembles nature. It appears in the form of the music and dance. The artist of Dionysos and Dream value amusement as having met Apollonistic abstinence. And amusement is a word that she is immersed in the state she wants and is intoxicated. So, why does Nietzsche talk about tragedy, especially music, as an act of art performed by an artist of intoxication and dreams? Nietzsche borrowed Schopenhauer's word about it and said, because music, unlike other art, is not an imitation of phenomena, but a direct imitation of a will. Because, in other words, it expresses the metaphysical for all the material thing in the world, the material for all the phenomena. Nietzsche also said that music must contain poetry. The ancient Greek tragedy was a combination of Apollon literary and Dionysos music. And it can be seen that it has both Apollon and Dionysos attributes. I'm going to reinterpret it as a contemporary hip-hop. Hip-hop is divided into 4 categories: MCing, breaking, DJing, and graffiti. One of the biggest features of hip-hop is that everyone can participate and there is no condition to participate. Hip-hop is open to everyone and there are no conditions for participation, such as property or cultural rebel. In the process of doing hip-hop, participants have an attitude of empathy for each other, suffering through mutual understanding across border, races, and rich and poor. One of the most important things in hip-hop culture is cypher, a kind of a freestyle jam. Cypher participants are now oblivious to other things than the fact that they are participating in cypher and discover a new aspect of themselves being immersed in them. It's a combination of self-deception and Apollon, self-awareness through Dionysus. This characteristic of cypher in hip-hop culture can also be seen as an artist of intoxication and dreams. The attitude of a character of the ancient Greek tragedy toward life is similar to the attitude of hip-hop. Instead of avoiding or rejecting their one destiny, the tragic character accept as they are. Hip-hop also show an affirmation of the reality it is in. The famous MC of the United States, KRS-One, talk about the origin of hip-hop. Hip is about getting certain information and knowing. Hop is about putting into practice. Hip-hop is about putting knowledge into life. In addition, there are many other possibilities for the reinterpretation of the ancient Greek tragedy of Nietzsche's church of intoxication and the characteristic of an artist of hip-hop. According to the Nietzsche's, the artist of intoxication and dream is a combination of Apollon and Dionysus, where the art of Apollon means language and the art of Dionysus means music. In fact, hip-hop has more ambivalent nature of language and music than any other musical genre. Unlike a songwriter, MCs mostly focus on the rhythm. In fact, the ancient Greeks called their poem damele, which means a poem to be called a song. Other scholars also consider similar between ancient Greek tragedy and hip-hop as follows. Adam Bradley and Derek Collins. I will now suggest a way to incorporate hip-hop or reinterpretation of ancient Greek tragedy into existing philosophical counseling. The first one is a spoken word. Spoken word is a genre of art in which a poem or writing is spoken, which means a writing or writing poem. Spoken word presenter can improvise and recite sentence, and they can also maximize their rhyme like a red rhyme. You can apply this to philosophy counseling in these following ways. First of all, the basic spoken word approach will be centered on the 5 stages of rap therapy in the existing John Elegant rap therapy, which will be modified to suit philosophical counseling. In addition, performance and sharing, which did not exist in the traditional rap therapy phase, are added to each of the 6 or 7 steps. The transformation of Don Elegant into a clinical and philosophical counselor is in the following orders. Number 1, this is existing rap therapy step 5. Step 1, assess and plan stage. This step is for the counselee to see if the host was interested in hip-hop or rap, and to figure out not only his or her favorite music, but also the genre of music he or she dislikes. We also see how much impact rap has on your life. In order to apply this step more appropriately to philosophical counseling, the counselor will not only grasp the interest in hip-hop or rap, but will also help the counselee realize what he or she has thought about hip-hop by constantly asking why the counselee likes or dislikes the rap. Step 2, building alliance stage. This is the stage of forming a full-fledged rapport with the counselor. I will listen to hip-hop and interpret the lyric together to form a bond. It's important not to contradict the counselee opinion of a particular rap, but to just accept his opinion as it is. It is also important for the counselee to express his or her thought to the counselor as they are. At this stage, the counselor will add the task of recurring the counselee to write his or her own interpretation in a few short sentences so that he or she can understand the through more logically and clearly, and the reason for the interpretation will be further described in the sentence. Step 3, reframe through the behavior stage. This step extends the understanding of different kinds of rap beyond the specific command of the counselor. In step 2, counselors may attempt to promote further restructuring by changing the stereotype and preconception they previously had about the rap through the process of expanding the type of rap they were familiar with. Step 4, reinforce through writing stage. This is the stage where the counselee writes the rap lyric in earnest. In the process, they may write the rap lyric about an area or topic of interest, and counselor may ask them to interpret the rap lyric they wrote and then to write lyric on the same topic from the different perspective or different topic. Step 5, maintain the change stage. This step now requires the counselee to write rap lyric on the variety of topics that affect the life of the counselee. Counselor can encourage the psychion to practice their one lyric. Through the rap lyric and the interpretation of the lyric that you wrote, you will be able to think deeply about a life problem and be able to solve them. Next. The 5 stage of non-illegal rap therapy has been proven to be effective for young patients and is still used in American young psychotherapy and psychoanalysis. But there is a limit to the sustainability of the treatment effect, because step 5 of the rap therapy only states the subject rap lyric writing programs and omit the process of actually expressing. Thus, to overcome this limitation, I added these 2 steps. Step 6, performance stage. This is the stage where the counselee performs in front of other participants as if he actually become a rapper on stage based on rap lyric he wrote. Throughout the process of altering their one lyrics, they have a chance to practice their one lyrics. This will allow the audience to experience their one lyrics on stage, providing the possibility of a future change. Step 7, sharing stage. In this stage, participants who finish the performance complete each other on the merits of the other stage to see what they liked and impressed each other. Throughout the sharing phase, participants will be able to identify their problem and understand their own problem earnestly. Through this process, the counselee will be able to empathize with the problem of the other counselee, and he will also be able to approach the solution to the problem through the process of being understood. Spoken word can also be seen as a paresthesia. In Greece, parrhesia means tell everything. Foucault tried to understand parrhesia as a practice of a certain statement rather than as an individual virtue or rhetorical skill. To increase the impression of an audience without skill or finesse, without pretense or disguise, that's the key to parrhesia. As for the act of parrhesia, Foucault say parrhesia is an act, it affects itself, and as itself, discourse can directly affect the soul. Another way to incorporate hip-hop into philosophy counseling is freestyle rap. Freestyle literally means the form of spontaneously spit something out. It could be just a rhyme to the beat or a little more adapt, and you could naturally tell what you want to say to the rhyme. The dominant feature is that there is no rule. You can do it to the beat, or you can enjoy it by forming your own rhythm without the beat. The important thing is that freestyle is the process of finding and creating the most comfortable rhythm for yourself in rapping. Freestyle is also the act of looking back on what you want to say and rapping it. If you apply this to philosophy counseling, it will be as follows. The counselor can listen to the counselee so that he or she can talk about his or her own problem, and the counselee can improvise his or her feeling or problem he or she has. In other words, the counselee is the performer, the MCs who perform to the counselor, and the counselor is the audience who listen to the freestyle of the counselee. Listen to his story and emphasize with the problem he has. The act of freestyle lab is self-expression and self-awareness to lead to self-consideration. This has the advantage of being able to connect self-awareness based on freestyle into beam of self-consideration, not only in the counseling room, but also after the counseling. Nietzsche says, the true Dionysos artist is revealed not in alternating coolness and intoxication, but in side-by-side condition. Freestyle, wait a minute. Yeah. Freestyle allow the counselee to get drunk in the beat to spit out what he really wants to say on the beat, and in the process, he'll get used to freestyle and try to get a better rhyme, which will allow him to be more objective in observing his one problem. This can be seen as a Dionysos artist with both calmness and intoxication described by Nietzsche, which will help the counselee find a solution to his one problem. And this is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Yankee Kim, for your presentation. Very expressive. Please, have you any questions? Short questions for our speaker. I have some question. If I understood correctly, that's this styles connection in philosophy and philosophical practice we can comprehend in a style of philosophy, style of philosophizing, style of contemporary philosophizing, like hip-hop, like a freestyle. But my question is, what was of ideas, what kind of ideas, philosophical ideas, give this style of philosophizing?
I think this, my opinion, looks like not traditional philosophy, but I think this opinion is Nietzsche's philosophy. So, Nietzsche's, according to the Nietzsche distinguishes I and itself. I is a rational mind, and itself is body. The body is the great intelligence, and reason is a small intelligence. So, even the mind belongs to, and it affected by the body. Yeah.
Okay, it's a philosophy of body. It's a philosophy of corporal. Yes. Okay. It's a language of body. Please, your question.
I have a question. It seems that your presentation is not about philosophical counseling, but rather about the philosophical justification of music counseling. I would like to hear what you think about this.
Same question. I think music counseling is a focus on research such as healing effect of music. But what I argue is a philosophy, and most of all, not just the result performance, but the process is important. In this regard, it is simply different from music counseling.
Thank you for answer.
Thank you. Thank you.
We have also one question from a chat. Madhvi Prasad asks you, could this practice resolve problems of all age groups? What could be these barriers?
Not actually not. Hip hop is not important in philosophy area. This main idea is about psychological area, but I think hip hop therapy used in United States, but United States hip hop therapy and music therapy in the psychological area, I don't think so. Hip hop is not psychological. I think the hip hop is more the philosophical. So I think this idea.
Thank you. Thank you. And last question from Anastasia. Do you know any research of the effectiveness of the method? Very interesting approach. That is a question for comprehension. That's also thank you, Anastasia, for this question. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Maybe we continue and start our free discussion about we had two presentations, very different, but I think that's many useful for the practice of philosophizing, for a philosophy like a lifestyle. And maybe you have some opinion about this. What is for you? It's like a new way. What is for you this productive in your own practice? What is the problem we have? All this direction. Your reaction on these presentations, please. If you have some, oh, sorry, please.
So it's Anastasia.
Anastasia,
I
please.
can't turn the camera on, yeah, because it ruins my Wi-Fi connection. So I would like to give a comment. So so I have my personal experience of psychotherapy, and I worked as a counselor, yeah, as well, yeah, so philosophy counseling. So, and I always wonder. What's like the bridge, what's the link between our awareness of something, we analyze something, we realize something, we know more about, I don't know, our worldview, our strategies, yeah, life strategies, things we do, we can realize a lot, so we have some knowledge. Does it mean that we would start act differently? So very often I observe that we can realize a lot. Yeah, so we have a kind of theory, I don't know, theoretical knowledge about ourselves, but it doesn't change the way we react. It doesn't change the way we really act. Yeah, and so that's my response to the first presentation. I found it really very interesting, like the philosophical background of the question. So that's so maybe you have yeah, I ask the audience, you have some comments, some other ideas. What's the bridge? How can we build this bridge? And because when we work as like as counselors, philosophical counselors, so like we see some changes in the worldview, maybe, but do we really see this effect that the person really starts to live differently, and there are real changes that are more observed in psychotherapy, as it seems to me. So I would like to hear some comments.
Thank you, Anastasia. For me, it's very productive, your idea about the bridge. For me, personally, philosophy is a as a project, projective activity, creation, a project of oneself. As person always in a boundary state between two realities. This reality of the actual and the reality of the possible. At the bridge between these realities, for me, it's philosophizing, in which necessary just much as deep the gap between these realities. Through self-awareness, they exist in an ontic states in world in itself. The person have opportunity to create, to complete his project in being, and being for itself. At this bridge, it's or drop, but it's a very interesting idea.
Sergi, can I?
Please, Bala.
Yeah, I have some connectivity problems, so let me allow me to speak this way without video. Yeah, actually, whatever you're saying, like knowing will not impact our activity, action. This puts extreme limits to philosophical practice. What I mean when I say this is, what is it that we would be doing to our counselee, the client? You would be talking to them, and you will also we will also try to help them in coming to some conclusion, acquire some insight within themselves, right? Because it's a self journey that a client would take it up. So in this self journey, we give them an insight that is there already within them. Okay, we help them in reaching that insight, which means it's a component of knowledge, and we don't know whether we would be successful in making this insight, put it in the life practically, right? Which means, are we really going to help the client in coming out fruitfully in the daily activities in response to what as a philosophical counselor we are doing to him? This question is a very serious question that all of us have to think about, because it tells us that probably our practice is going to fail us, right? Fail the client, because it's not going to the knowledge, our effort to make the client know is not going to. We don't know whether that would be put in effect in the activity. So this is a very fatal question which requires more exploration. Thank you so much for that. I'm sorry I missed most of the part of the talk because I just joined. Thank you.
Thank you for your day. Thank you, Dala. Yes, we can understand the knowledge that's two ways. It's knowledge in like cognitive skills, knowledge like gnoseology, but slowly knowledge in ontological way, knowledge like presence in reality, knowledge about human being, and that's in a different way. What the knowledge about the person, about the client we have.
Yeah, I agree with you on that point that knowledge can be cognitive as well as ontological, etc. But knowing is not going to, we don't know whether, see, even the knowing on the part of the client is also his own statement. That's why the metaphor that I have used the other day, 2 days back in the discussion, that the philosophical counselor is a blindfolded person. Okay, he is only exposed to the narrative of the client.
Okay.
And if the client says, I understood, we have to understand that he understood, right?
Yeah.
So,
It's
so
true.
even
It's
the
true.
even the knowledge part is also what he says. No, it is dependent on what he says. So that is how it's a complicated thing than stating it in simple terms.
Okay. But we have in mind that it's the aim of our conversation. It's philosophy itself, it's not treatment. Philosophy, that style of life, style of life, way of life. But if we talk about help, and that's help a very different way, understanding philosophically. It's not psychological help and psychotherapy. Please, Guru.
I just want to thank you for this very interesting talk. And I don't work with single people. I always work with groups. And sometimes I have like 3-day workshops or retreats, dialogues retreats. And during such a retreat, we often have physical exercise of some kind. It could be philosophical walks. It could be dynamic meditation, which is, you know, I just turn on music and we dance. And for some, that is really awkward. While for others, they just love it because they love dancing. And either way, we meet, or maybe the people who feels that this is awkward meet their limits. And then afterwards, it's possible to talk about it. How did we experience this? So I never do this at the beginning. I always do it when people have started to know each other, you know, maybe towards the end of the second day or something. But it's really powerful, and it's really great. Your talk gives me inspiration to develop this more theoretically as well. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Guru. It's very interesting. It's a connection, this body corporal activity and dancing, this meditative practice. It's meditative not for itself, but meditative like prepare for a philosophical, contemplative, philosophical contemplation. Yes, without this meditative preparation, we haven't deep understanding some philosophical idea and deep immersion in this philosophical text and example. But meditative practice for me also very important in my practice, like a centering exercise for myself. and then for me open the depth of the thoughts, depth of understanding. This preparation very necessary, because in our everyday life we don't organize, don't center on one themselves, and this very important. And without this practice, our understanding and philosophical thoughts will be very superficial, and then give new mood for contemplative mood that's necessary for philosophy. Thank you.
Hello.
Yeah, please. Abhishek.
Yeah, Sergey. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, yes, this debate between knowing and acting, that is very much prevalent in rational emotive behavior therapy and logic-based therapy. So if we go to Albert Ellis and Vinde Dryden, so these people used to think that even if you are making client aware about the irrationality of his beliefs, he or she is not going to overcome that. So after that, after telling him that there is some irrationality in your belief system, you have to offer some kind of exercises, and exercises plays an important role in REBT. So, and if we move forward to E.D. Cohen's logic-based therapy, then he argues, he alleges that there is some inconsistency in REBT, because these people are saying that problems are emerging from irrationality of belief system, but these people are offering some kind of exercises, and these people are saying that if you are familiar with the irrationality of your belief system, you are not going to be overcome. But and if we look to the REBT, rational emotive behavior therapy, then these people have a very comprehensive a very comprehensive approach to human problems and developmental transformation. And it's really important to move from knowledge to exercise, as we got opinion just after Bala sir, that when we are talking about practice, then there should be some exercise, and then practice is something more than knowledge, and that's really important. And I think that Vinde Dryden has a point that you can't be transformed unless you act on the knowledge what you have. So mere knowledge doesn't seem sufficient to lead a person to the transformation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's also a very important concept that Abhishek said, self-transformation, like aim of philosophy, aim on philosophical practice and philosophical counsel and self-transformation, but it's not a momentary situation. It's very long time duration, this process, but it's necessary. Without it, it's philosophy only on surface. It's very interesting idea, but if not change in me, not change in my life, that's the waste of time. Yeah, what about this? Another main question. It's what about the problem of dialogue? Dialogue. It's all of philosophizing is dialogue, and dialogism very important stage, and it's a very important and necessary condition of philosophizing. It's maybe in this new practice, new style of philosophy, philosophizing give us a new model of dialogue. What is means the modern and contemporary contemplative dialogue. Maybe we have some idea about dialogism. My question arises and my team connection this basic relationship between me and my interlocutor. This relationship and space between, it's more important than my knowledge, than my speech and speech another. If we haven't this place, having these situations between, it's our dialogue not possible. It's how to achieve in situation I, you, as a Buber said. Yes, Gura, right, dancing together is a form of dialogue. Yes, I agree with it. It's very intensive dialogue, very impressive and emergent. Yes, of course. If you don't have some idea, maybe someone want to give a conclusion, what maybe our speakers say some word in conclusion, our round table. Okay, maybe it's a very big experience, because many philosophers say that silence and also dialogue, very deep dialogue. But our silence, it's it's a witness of our deep thoughts about what it is content, our conversation. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you our all participants. Thank you our speakers. And we continue our conference. Yes. Goodbye.
Bye. Thank you.